Good morning, everyone. In the last class, we started our discussion related to Spring Security. Spring Security is a module available in the Spring framework, which is used for authentication as well as authorization. Authentication, nothing but checking who can access our application. Authorization, nothing but who can access which functionality. In order to work with Spring Security in the project, we are going to use one dependency that is called boot starter security dependency. When we add this dependency in our project pom.xml, by default, it will provide basic authentication for our application. For that basic authentication, default username will be user, password will be printed on the console. By using these credentials, we can access our basic auth application. When we access this basic auth application from the browser, then it will display login page to access our application. If you want to access this application from the Postman or from the other Java application, you need to send authentication header in the request. Key will be authorization, value will be encoded username and password. If you don't want to go with the default credentials given by Spring Security, we can override those credentials also. In order to override those credentials, we can configure the information in the properties file or YML file. So if you want to override security default credentials, then you can use this approach. Okay, fine. Now, after configuring the above credentials, after configuring the credentials like above, we need to use those credentials to access our application. If you don't write these properties, then it will take the default credentials. If you don't want the default credentials, then you can override credentials like this. Okay, fine, good. So in the last session, we created our security basic auth application. So here REST controller is available. Inside the REST controller, we have one method also. Get request method is available, which is having /message as a URL pattern. Perfect. Let me run this application, run as boot application. In this application, we have added security starter. So we are getting basic authentication by default. So if you see security starter is available, we are having one REST controller. And I have configured my username and password also in the properties file. Let's go to the browser and access this. Localhost colon 8081/message. Fine. It is asking to login. So by default, basic authentication is added for this application. When I try to access this application, it is asking me to login. So I'm giving my username and password. Then I'm able to access my project. That's fine. Currently, in our application, how many methods are available? So there is only one method available. Let me write one more method here. So let's write it as greet method, get greet message, something like a good morning. And I'm going to write one more method called welcome method, right? Get welcome message, greet message and welcome message. Inside the welcome message, I'm writing welcome to Ashokite. So here, if you observe, there are two methods available in my REST controller. Security is applicable for any particular method, or security is applicable for all the methods available in the REST controller. Security is applicable for all the methods available in the REST controller. Now, let me stop this server and start again. Run as boot application. Let me close the browser and open, because cookies will be stored when we log in for first time. Now, my application is started. Inside this application, there are two methods available. One is greet method. When I access greet method, it is asking for login. And when I access welcome also, it is asking for login. So what is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of that? Whenever we add security starter in the pom.xml, that security is applicable for all the methods available in the application. It's not for particular method. So if you have multiple REST controllers with multiple methods, all the HTTP methods will be secured by using our Spring Security. If you have 20 methods also like this, all the 20 methods will be secured with the HTTP basic authentication. But in the real time, this is not recommended. The reason is in my application, there are multiple methods available. For example, there is a method available which is used to get the contact us information. If you go to the website, when I click on login page button, for this opening the login page, security is required, security is not required. Everyone should be able to access the login page. For the login method, security should not be available. Okay. When I click on contact us page is opening. For this, security is required or security not required? Not required. So that means if you go to any application, for example, login page will be available. For this login page, security required or not required? Not required. There is a method called amount to transfer method. To transfer amount from one account to another account, then security is required. And there is another method to check the balance of our account. For that, security is required. What about us page, contact us page? Security not required. So in the project, multiple methods will be available in the multiple controllers. So do we need to apply security for all the methods available in the application, or we should not apply for all the methods available in the application? We should not apply for all the methods available in the application. We need to apply security for few methods, and we should not apply security for few methods in our project. For example, here I'm writing one method, public string contact us. Okay. So I'm going to return some message contact, something like this. This method I am mapping to a GET request by using GET mapping. So here I am giving URL pattern as /contact. Okay. So in this class, there are 3 methods available. For these 2 methods, I want security, but for this method, I don't want security. But what is the default behavior of the Spring Security? The security is applicable for all the methods available in our REST controller. But I don't want the security for all the methods available in the REST controller. Here, we need to customize Spring Security. What we need to do here, guys? We need to customize our Spring Security. When we are adding security dependency, they already told that highly customizable Spring Security framework for authentication as well as for authorization. When I add this security starter, by default, it is securing all the HTTP methods available in our application. I don't want that. I want to customize security in my application. For a few methods, I want security. For few methods, I don't want security. How do we customize that? Here, if you see, we are going to create one separate configuration class, guys. We are going to create one separate configuration class. In that configuration class, we are going to create a security filter. In that security filter, we are going to specify for which URLs security is not required. So in the whole project, so assume that there are 10 methods available. For them, security is not required. For the remaining methods, security is required. We need to provide that information to the Spring Security for which URLs you want secure, for which URLs you want security, for which URLs you don't want security. That we need to customize here. So let us see how to customize. For that, we need to create one configuration class in the project, guys. So that can be, name can be anything. Security configuration, new class. So I'm giving the package name as a config, or else you can give the package name as a security. So here I'm giving the name as security config. So it is a normal Java class. This Java class I want to represent as a configuration class. For that, we will use one annotation called @configuration annotation. @configuration annotation. What is the meaning of @configuration? What is the meaning of @configuration? This class is represented as a config class in the Spring. It is considered as a Spring Bean also. What is the purpose of this class? To customize Spring security. So for that, there will be a annotation called enable web security. What is the annotation? Enable web. That means we are telling to this application, we are telling to the Spring security, this is my configuration class which is used for web security. So it is applying the security for all the methods available in the application, but I don't want the security for all the methods. I want to apply the security for only few methods, not for all. For which methods you don't want to apply the security, you need to configure those URL patterns, right? So in order to configure those URL patterns, we need to override one method. Method name can be anything. That means we are customizing basically security filter chain here. So let us take this security filter chain @bean annotation. What is the meaning of @bean annotation, guys? What is the purpose of @bean? What is the purpose of @bean? @bean annotation is used to represent that we are configuring one bean programmatically. So this class is represented as a configuration class. So what is the meaning of that configuration class? IOC container will create the object. But for the security filter, I don't want IOC to create the object. I want to create the object programmatically. IOC should consider this one as a Spring Bean. IOC should consider this as a Spring Bean. So ant matchers, the method is undefined. Yeah. So here for these URL patterns, I don't want to apply the security. One is contact, one is about, another one is Swagger. Swagger URL also they can access directly. We don't want to configure any security for that Swagger UI also. Let's scroll down, see here. I'm taking one class with a name called security config. For that, I'm using a annotation called @configuration annotation. And I'm writing one more annotation called enable web security annotation. Here I'm creating a bean. For this bean, for this method, I'm using @bean. So what is @bean annotation, guys? What is @bean annotation? Which is used to represent our method return type as a Spring Bean. So whatever the method is returning, that will be represented as a Spring Bean. So what we are telling, when you are dealing with a request, any request which comes with these three URL patterns, permit all of them. So any request which comes with /contact, /about, about is also not available in our program, but if in future about us page, if it is there, I'm going to allow this one. If Swagger is available, allow the Swagger also. If any other request comes, then you authenticate that request by using this form login. Okay. So the meaning is, if the request is coming with any one of these three URL patterns, you allow them. If any other URL is coming, then you authenticate that by using form login. This is customization of our security. So applying the security for specific URL patterns. Apply the security for the specific URL pattern. Let's try this one once. Refresh, run this application, run as boot app. Application started, then close this browser, open again so that cookies will be deleted. Now first, let's access localhost colon 8081. Our port number is 8081/welcome. When I go for welcome URL, what is happening? When I go for welcome URL, it is asking me to log in. Similarly, let's go for localhost colon 8081/greet. For this method also, security is available. Then let's go here, localhost colon 8081/contact. For this method, security is applied or directly we are able to access. Directly we are able to access. So in my REST controller, there are three methods available. If you see in my REST controller, there are three methods available. Out of these three, for one method, security is not required. For the remaining methods, I want security. So how to tell to Spring Security that we need to secure only some URLs, but not all the URLs? That's where we need to customize our security configuration. To customize our security configuration, we are using security filter chain. What is that, guys? Security filter chain we are using. In that security filter chain, we are going to specify which URLs it has to allow and which URLs it should not allow. Look at this one. So this method name can be anything, guys. We are writing a bean method, right? So method name can be anything. When the application started, IOC container will call this method and IOC container will take filter chain. In the filter chain, we have configured customization of our security for which URLs permit all. Nothing but if the request comes with any one of this URL, you permit that. If any other request comes, you authenticate that by using form login. That's it. So for meaningful name, I'm writing the method name as security filter. Are you guys clear with this one? Perfect. So with this, we understood how to secure specific URL patterns in the Spring Security. So what is the meaning of that? When we add security starter in pom.xml, then it will apply security filter for all the HTTP methods of our application. When we add security starter in the pom.xml, then it will apply the security filter for all the HTTP methods of our application. But in the reality, we need to secure only few methods, but not all the methods in our application. As given example here, for example, so if you see login page, to load the login page, security not required. For transferring the amount, checking the balance, security is required. But for the remaining two methods, about us, contact us, security not required. So in order to achieve above requirement, we need to customize security configuration in our project like below. So we need to customize that security filter chain bean by specifying which URLs it should allow directly, which URLs it should authenticate. For some URLs, I'm telling that directly, permit them. For any other URLs apart from this list, then authenticate that by using form login. Are you clear? Good. Now, next one, we are going for in-memory authentication, guys. What is the next concept here? We are going for in-memory authentication. What is in-memory authentication? Currently, we are configuring user credentials in the properties file. So what is the meaning of that? configuring the user credentials in the properties file. What is the meaning of configuring the user credentials in the properties file? So for authentication, we are specifying if any request comes with these credentials, then only it is valid and process that. If the credentials are not matching with this, then don't process that. But here I have configured only one user data. I have configured only one user data. I want to configure multiple users. I want to configure multiple users. Ashok is one user, John is one user, Charles one user, Raju, Ramesh, Anil, Sunil, like that. Multiple users will be available for our application. Let's assume that my application is having multiple clients, guys. So let's assume that my application is having multiple clients. My application is having multiple clients. So here this is my REST API. This is my REST API. For my REST API, there are some clients available. Okay. So this is a client 1. This is a client 2. Client 1 is available. Client 2 is available. Client 3 is available. Okay. Now this client, assume that this client is Raju. And this is some Rani. And some John is available. Okay. Good. So like this, we are having 3 clients for our application. Now what I want to do is, in my Spring Security, I need to specify if the request comes from the Raju, then allow that. If the request comes from the Rani also, allow that. If the request comes from the John also, allow that. So these are 3 users who can access my application. For these 3 users, I will give the credentials. Raju, this is your username and password. So if you send the request with your credentials, then only my application will access. Similarly, I will share the credentials for separate credentials for every user. I'm not giving same credentials for every user. I'm giving separate credentials for every user. For the Raju, username and password is available. Rani having username and password. John also having username and password. So how to configure multiple users for the authentication? So as of now, only one user is available for the authentication. How to configure multiple users for the authentication by using in-memory authentication concept? Are you guys clear with my point? So currently in our application, how many users are configured? How many users are configured in our application? Currently, only one user is configured in our application. But I want to configure multiple users in our application. If you use a YML file, you can configure only one user. But if you want to configure multiple users, then you need to go for a concept called in-memory authentication. You need to use a concept called in-memory authentication. How to create in-memory authentications? Read this point. What we are telling about in-memory authentication? In-memory authentication means storing user credentials in the program for the authentication purpose. Storing user credentials in the program for the authentication purpose. What we are telling about here? Not recommended for product, just for practice purpose. If you want to store the credentials within the application, then you can write one method like this. What is this one? What is the bean? In-memory user details manager, then configure users. How to configure the user? User with the default password encoder. What is the username? What is the password? What is the role for that user? Admin role will be available. User role will be available. So we are passing all the user details for in-memory user details manager. So let us go to that security configuration. Now remove these things from here. Let us go to security config. We need to write one more bean, public. What is the bean name? In-memory user details manager. Okay. in-memory users. I'm taking the parameter as in-memory users. So for the in-memory users, I need to return this object by customizing that object. So I want to represent this also as a Spring Bean. How can we do that? By using @bean method. By using @bean method, we are using that. Next one, user dot with default password encoder dot what is the username dot password, some password dot authorities nothing but the roles that you want to give for that user, admin role dot build. So with this we are able to create one user object. With this we are able to create one user object. Let us store this user object, Ashok user object. So with these credentials, Ashok user can be authenticated in our application. So earlier we configured credentials in the properties file. What is the problem? If I configure them in the properties file, we can configure only one user. But I want to allow multiple users to access my application. I want to configure multiple users. To configure multiple users in our application, I'm creating one bean with a name called in-memory user details manager. One user I have created like this. Let's create one more user also, user dot with a default password encoder dot username, something like some John, some password for that user dot username dot password dot authorities. What is this user role? Authority is nothing but role. So I'm giving this user as a normal user role dot build. So with this, one more user got created, John user. So like this, we can create multiple users who can access our application. Like this, we can create multiple users who can access our application. Finally, I'm going to return new in-memory user details manager. What are the users available? One is Ashok user, another one is John user. That's it. I'm creating one bean. Here I'm using in-memory user details manager. For this bean, I'm creating two user objects and I'm adding those two user objects to this bean. I'm initializing this bean with these two objects. Can I say it is a constructor injection now? For the constructor, I am passing two objects. One object belongs to Ashok user who is having admin role. Another user is John user who is having normal user role. Now, so in this application for authentication, Spring Security will check whatever the credentials we are giving. Those credentials are matching with any one of the user which is configured in the in-memory user details manager. Those credentials are matching with in-memory user details manager or not. Clear? Now, so here if you see in the security configuration, I have updated two things here. First one, we are writing security filter. Second one, we are writing in-memory user details manager. What is the purpose of this security filter chain, guys? What is the purpose of security filter chain? To specify which URLs should be secured, which URLs should not. That means for which URL patterns security is not required, we are going to configure by using filter chain. What is the purpose of this? In-memory user details manager bean. What is the use of that bean here? What is the purpose of this bean? It is used to specify who can access our application. Three things here. If you don't configure any credentials, Spring Security will use the default credentials. Username will be available as user. Password will be printed on the console. If you want to override them, credentials you can configure in the properties file. That is one thing. But in the properties file, how many users we can configure? Only one user. If I want to configure multiple users, then one of the option, in-memory authentication. What is the meaning of in-memory authentication? Configuring the users within the application. Configuring the users within the application programmatically. That is called in-memory authentication. Okay. Let's stop it and run this program. Refresh. Run as boot application. Application is started. Application started. Can you please read this point? When we are configuring the user, we have used default password encoder, which is not recommended for the production. User with default password encoder is considered unsafe for the production and only for sample applications, but not for real applications. So that's why we are getting one deprecated message also. User with the default password encoder. Do we have any other option? User with user details, username, builder, password encoder. It is not accepting. We'll change that later, guys. So currently I'm using default password encoder. It is not used in the real time. It is for only sample application. So we will use password encoder, which is bcrypt password encoder when we are saving our user details. Right. So look at this bin. In-memory user details manager we have taken. For that bin, we are configuring two users. One is Ashok, another one is John. For that user, we are using default encoder, which is not recommended. We need to change the password encoder to bcrypt password encoder. We will configure that. And like this, we can configure any number of users programmatically by using in-memory authentication. Okay. So let's stop this project and run this one. Run as boot application. Clear the console. We need to close the browser. Yeah. Localhost colon 8081/welcome. Am I able to access the welcome URL? No. Why? What is the reason we are not able to access welcome URL? Am I skipping the welcome URL from the security configuration? I'm not skipping the welcome URL. So welcome URL is secured in our application. Similarly, let's go for greet URL. Is it allowing to access the greet URL? No. Greet URL also not allowed. This is also part of secured URL. And if you go and access contact URL, am I able to access the contact URL? Yes, I'm able to access. I'm able to access contact URL. How come the first two URLs we are not able to access? The third URL we are able to access. How come we are able to access the third URL? Third URL we are configuring in the filter chain. I'm telling to allow that URL. If any request comes with /contact, then permit all. That request we should allow in our application. Okay, cool. Contact is working as expected. Then go for this welcome, not working. I need to give the credentials here. I need to give the credentials here. The credentials, if I give some dummy data, it is saying bad credentials. So now two users can access this application. So let us give my credentials, click on sign in. Am I able to access? Yes, with my credentials, we are able to access. This is in one browser. 1 minute. Right. Guys, with my credentials, I'm able to access this application. Let me go for another browser and let us see. Are we able to access this in another browser or not? 8081/greet. 8081/greet is available. With this greet, am I able to access the method directly or I'm unable to access the method directly? Unable to access the method directly. So now can we try with John user now? Can we try with the John user? Yes. So let's go here, John and John. You can see the password, the username and password I have configured. Click on sign in. So John is able to access the secured URL. That means John is authenticated successfully. My credentials, with my credentials, authentication got success. With John credentials also, authentication got success. So what is the conclusion now? What is the conclusion now? Two users we have configured for the authentication purpose. So in the properties file, we configured only one user for authentication. Now in the in-memory authentication, we configured two users for the authentication. So this concept is called in-memory authentication. What is the meaning of in-memory authentication? Configuring users in the program for the authentication purpose. This is just for practice purpose. Are we going to configure users in the application in the real time? We don't do that. Okay. So let's check the Spring documentation, what they're telling about the security. So let's go to Spring security. Official documentation will be available. Let us check it. Spring Security is a powerful and a highly customizable authentication and access control framework. It is the de facto standard for securing Spring-based applications. If any application we are developing by using Spring or Spring Security, the standard way to secure those applications using Spring Security module. Okay. Now, can you read this point now? Spring Security is a framework that focuses on providing both authentication and authorization to Java applications. Okay, so it is highly customizable framework. Now we have seen we are customizing. We are customizing by default. It is securing all the URL patterns. With the customization, I'm allowing few URLs. I'm not allowing for few URLs. We configured one user in the properties file yesterday. Today we are able to configure two users in the program for the authentication, in-memory authentication. This is the customization. What are the benefits available with our Spring Security, guys? What are the real benefits we are getting with the Spring Security? Can you please read this one? Comprehensive and extensible support for both authentication and authorization. So we already discussed yesterday what is authentication and what is authorization. Protection against the attacks like session fixation, click jocking, cross-site request forgery, etc. Servlet API integration, optional integration with the WebMVC, and much more features also available with the Spring. So basically, it is a framework or it is a module available in the Spring which is used to secure our applications. This is a highly customizable for authentication and authorization as per our project requirement. Now, a quick guide for this one, getting started with Spring Security, getting Spring Security. So release numbering, use with Maven. So in the documentation, they are saying this is the dependency that we need to use to work with the Spring Security. Okay. Maven without Spring Security. Dependencies configuration they are giving. Samples. Spring Security repository. So GitHub repository they have given with the boot. Oh, there are a number of examples. Yeah, here, can you see here? They are also creating one Java bean object. In that they are using with the default password encoder, username, password, and roles they are configuring, and they are building that object. So configuration, enable socket security. We have enabled web security. So let me go for Spring Security repository, sample applications, boot, Webflux, Hello World Insecure, OAuth Security, SAML login. So this is official Spring Security Git repository from Spring people. So I'm checking what are the examples they have given for this. Samples. No. Yeah, guys. Now see here. When I go for Spring Security website, the official website is available. There they have given the documentation for Spring Security. So along along with this documentation, they have provided some sample examples also for the Spring Security. When you go for the samples, the first example they have given Hello Security with the Spring MVC. So go to this application. That is a basically Git repository they have given. So they have given the example based on the security filter chain. Now go to this one. This is the first example. Okay. Now go to SRC and main Java example. Here index controller.java is available. Inside the index controller, they have created one method. Then Hello Security application, which is a start class in the Spring Boot. And what is this one, guys? Security configuration.java. So can you see what they have done in this security configuration? What is this annotation? @configuration. What is the next one? Enable web security. So can you please look into this? What is this? Come on. What they are doing here? Whatever that we have done, same thing. They are customizing security filter chain object. Form login. Here we have configured form login. They are calling one method called with defaults, something like this. It is not coming here. Security, let me take their method. Let us see from where they are getting with defaults. With defaults, it is a static import. With default form login, http dot authorize any request which comes here, then any request authorized dot any request which is matching with our configuration. I want to allow them. Authorize and matchers, request matchers, request matchers. With the request matchers, we are going to specify slash contact comma slash swagger-ui dot html dot permit all. If any other request comes, then you authenticate that request. And how they are configuring the user credentials here, same, whatever that we have configured, in-memory user details with the default password encoder, username, password, roles, authorities or roles, we can use anything, dot build method. Here they have configured only one user, but here we have configured two users. So we can configure only one user or you can configure two users also. Like this, they have customized Spring security configuration when you go for hello with a Spring web starter. If you go with the WebFlux starter, then different configuration. Go to the main Java and security configuration. So here, what is the annotation they are using? What is the annotation they are using? Enable WebFlux security they are using. Same concept, map reactive users. They are configuring one in-memory user in our application. Okay, fine. Next example with Kotlin OAuth 2. Hello security with OAuth 2.0 and Spring Web MVC, Spring Web Flux or Socket, Spring Authorization Server, LDAP login, custom user details with the Spring Web MVC, JWT login with the Spring Web MVC, multi-factor authentication with the Spring MVC, Spring security examples available. Let us go for custom user details, main. So user detail service, user repository, user details, custom user, current user. So they are using the predefined classes which are given by Spring Security to customize users information. Okay. So with this we understood what is Spring Security, what is the main purpose of the Spring Security, what is authentication, what is authorization, and how to work with default credentials given by Spring Security, how to override Spring Security default credentials, and how to secure specific URL patterns using Spring Security by customizing that security configuration. This is the method which we are using to customize that security configuration. And this is the method which is used for in-memory credentials, basically. So if you want to configure multiple users for authentication, then you can use this in-memory credentials for that. In-memory user details manager is available. Okay. But in the real time, we are not going to configure users in the program like this. We need to maintain users data in the database. So when user trying to access our application, it is going to display a login page. So when user try to log in, it should verify the credentials are available in the database or not. So for that, we need to go for a concept called JDBC authentication. So currently we are using in-memory authentication. In-memory authentication, nothing but it is verifying the user details available within our application or not. Now I need to tell to Spring to verify user credentials are available in the database or not. So to verify the user credentials are available in the database or not, we will go for JDBC authentication. So we will store the user's data in the database. When user login, Spring Security should perform authentication by retrieving the data from database table. So how to configure JDBC authentication in the Spring Security? So let us see how do we configure JDBC authentication in the Spring Security. So to configure JDBC authentication, first we need to set up the tables in the database where our users will be available, in which database table our user information will be available. We need to maintain that data in one database table. We need to maintain that data by using one database table. One table is used for storing the user's data. Another table will be available to store the roles of the user, nothing but authorities of the user. This user is belongs to which role. Okay, so one table will be available to maintain users information. Another table will be available to maintain authorities information. When we are storing users in the database, we are going to store username and encoded password. So to encode the password directly, this online website is available. By using bcrypt algorithm, we can do the encoding. So string is available. Let me give abc@123 encrypted. So this is the value that we are getting. Instead of storing the password directly in the database, we are going to use this bcrypt encryption technique, and username encrypted password we are going to store in the database table. So here if you see, JDBC authentication is used to fetch database table data for user authentication purpose. If users are available in the database table, if you want to perform authentication with the table data, then we need to configure JDBC authentication in our Spring Security application. So if you want to configure that JDBC authentication, first we need to create required tables in the database. One table is user table, another table is role table or authorities table. When we are creating these tables, we need to insert some data also. So I'm inserting one user record with John, another user record with Smith. Okay, so when I'm inserting the record, John username password is encrypted. How I have encrypted that password? By using this online encryptor tool. I have inserted two records into user table. For the John, I'm giving two roles. For the Smith, I'm giving one role. So in the user table, two users inserted. For those users, roles inserted in the authorities table. John is having two roles. He is acting as an admin. He is acting as a user also. Smith is having only one role. He is a normal user. Once it is done, then how we will configure JDBC authentication? We need to use data JDBC dependency MySQL connector, because it should retrieve the data from the MySQL database. So to connect with MySQL database, MySQL driver is required. To perform JDBC operations, data JDBC dependency is required. Then we are going to configure data source information with which database our application should communicate. Okay, your MySQL database configuration we will configure here. Then this is our REST controller. Then security customization. So earlier we have the filter chain. Now I'm configuring security for the URLs, authentication as well as authorization is also available. Earlier I'm saying that If URLs matching with this one, permit them. Now, these URLs are secured along with the roles. There is a method called /admin method. That method should be accessed by the users who are having only admin role. There is a method called normal user method. That method can be accessed by admin user as well as normal user also. So in this JDBC authentication example, authentication plus authorization configuration is also available. What is the meaning of authorization? Now, can John access, can Smith access this method? What is the role for the Smith here? What is the role we are giving for the Smith? User role. Who can access this admin method? Who can access admin method? Has role. So if the person who is logged in, if that person is having admin role, then only he can access that method. So here authentication is available as well as authorization is also available. So role based security we are going to configure. For authentication we are using database table data. For authorization we are using roles configuration here. Okay, so complete example is available. I want you people to give it a try. Step-by-step document is available. How to implement Spring Security with the JDBC authentication. So step 1, you need to create the tables. Table creation queries also I have given. Step 2, you need to insert the records into table. You choose your own password. Whenever you are inserting, you generate the password and you use your encrypted password here. Then create boot application with these dependencies. Configure your data source. Create REST controller with required methods. Okay, there are 3 methods available. One is for admin, one is for user, one is for normal. Okay, then customize the Spring Security. This method is used to configure JDBC authentication in the application, and this method is used to customize URL patterns. For which URL security is required, which URL, which user can access, that configuration is also available. Then finally run the application and test it. So this is the task for you people. Complete code is there, steps also available. I want you people to give it a try. So tomorrow I will also explain this example with JDBC authentication. Once this JDBC authentication is completed, then we will go for data JPA with the Spring Security. So in general, we will use data JPA to perform user registration and user login by using Spring Security. Okay, so tomorrow we will work on 2 examples. One is the JDBC authentication example. Another one is Spring Security with the data JPA. Are you clear? Can you try this one? Yeah, good. Any questions, anybody? Let me update this document. This is for your reference, guys, for practice. You need to practice today in-memory authentication example and JDBC authentication example.
Ashok, previously we are using the separate a class called we creating to implement the security configure adapter. Now it is updated to this annotation.
Yeah, earlier, guys, before Spring Boot 3.x version, Spring Security configuration will extend the properties from WebMVC configure adapter. Now that is outdated. It is not there in the latest version.
Okay, this
Everything
whatever
we are configuring as a bean. Yeah, this is the latest configuration.
Yeah, yet enable web security annotation.
Correct. So people in the Spring Boot, in the Spring 5.x version, in the Spring Boot 2.x version, configuration class will extend the properties like this. So guys, earlier when we are working with the security in the previous versions, we are going to configure like this, web MVC configurer adapter. I think they have removed that class also.
Yes, sure. Actually, security configure adapter name.
Yeah. So they have removed that web security configure adapter that is old, outdated. Now, in the recent version of the Spring, security configuration we will do by using annotation. Any customization is required, we will configure a bean like this.
Yes,
Filter chain bean and in-memory users are JDBC authentication for everything. Customized beans we are going to configure.
Yes, on that turn we are configure both one method, right? Configure method and do those things. But
Correct.
instead of those things, we are using this annotation, right?
Perfect.
Thanks.
Hello,
Guys,
sir.
what about
Time project
assignments that I
developed
have given yesterday? Did you guys completed that? Are you able to access secured REST API by using REST template and web client? Yeah. Any questions,
Sir,
anyone?
real-time project, they will use JDWT tokens or
JWT
OAuth
tokens, yes.
Okay, sir.
We are going to see that.
Sir, if you are using API gateway, we need Spring Security as well.
Correct. Security will be available at the API. I will show you security integration with the microservices also. First, we are learning the security concept. Once this security concept is completed, I will show you in the microservices architecture where the security will be configured in the real time. Okay, so security configuration will be separated in the real time. It will not be part of our microservices. So one separate service will be available for the security, and the authentication and authorization will happen at the API gateway. So we'll do that project.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hi Ashok, how can we perform role-based authentication?
That is the
Role-based access.
JDBC authentication, right? We are configuring for a user, which user having which role. If the user is having that role, then only they can access that method. That is the next example.
Okay, okay, sure.
Hello,
Sir,
sir.
yesterday I have seen
Sir,
the
for
video
in-memory
video.
authentication, role-based, we can pass role-based rules, right?
You can
In-memory
configure
also.
there also. Yes, you can configure there also.
Practice for practice, yeah.
Yes, right. In the in-memory authentication also, you can configure the roles. No problem.
Hello. Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday you told us to watch a one-way interview video that you have uploaded in the YouTube.
Yep.
So you have asked one indirect question like how do you manage the database in your project? So how can we
Connection
answer
pools we need to explain.
connection pools?
Yep. Have you gone through that video, guys? Mock interview. Complete. Any questions that you don't know? Answers.
Sir, direct question answers we can answer, but indirect questions like this, how do you manage database? So like that questions, how we can answer?
With experience, you will get it, sir. You should know. That is the reason these mock interviews to find those answers. You need to research.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Perfect.
Hello, sir. Good
Yeah,
morning.
hi.
Sir, if we need some experience letter, then can you give some contact number of
Yeah,
consultancy,
sure,
sir?
sir. We'll do that. We'll do that.
Sir, yesterday I talked to admin team, so they will tell to talk to the first Ashok, sir. So I was
Sure, sir. You can
asking, sir.
message me personally. We can discuss on that part.
Okay.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir,
Yeah.
the password you are encrypting, you are encoding, the value which is stored in database is encoded one, right? Encoded.
Encrypted. Encrypted.
Encrypt,
Bcrypt algorithm we are using to encrypt, and we are storing that.
There is a difference between encoded form
and encryption. Yes, this is encrypted. Plus after encryption, they will do the encode. Bcrypt algorithm is used.
So can we do it by programmatically encryption?
Encryption, you can do it also. You can do it also. That is what I will show you tomorrow. I will show you registration login with the Spring Security. So when we are inserting the record into the table, it will be encrypted and will be inserted into the table. I will show you that.
Okay, sir.
Sir, when we validate this username and password, then at that time, again, it needs to decode, right? From
that
the database.
Internally, it will take care of that, sir. Spring Security will take care of that for the authentication. We no need to do that and all.
Okay.
Sir, and for encoding, we need to add some library or in
Not
every
required.
time.
Bcrypt is inbuilt in the Spring Boot, sir. You no need to add separate library for encryption and decryption.
Sir, for database connection, is it Hikari related application properties?
Yes, sir. Hikari configuration will be there for the connection pooling in the Spring Boot. We can customize that Hikari properties.
Okay.
Okay. Fine. Good, guys. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow session. So please do the practice with the in-memory authentication as well as with the JDBC authentication before coming to tomorrow's session. That is the task for today. Good. Thank you.